It was prom night, and I was ecstatic. I was dressed in a pink, strapless, diaphanous gown that fell to mid-thigh. The bodice clung to my developing curves, but the neckline was high enough to remain tasteful. My opera-length gloves fit snugly around my arms. I wore my mother's pearls, and carried a small drawstring purse, while I paced nervously around our living room. Ella was there, dressed similarly. We stood for photos while our mothers beamed proudly. I felt beautiful, but was extremely nervous for some reason. Was I going to get stood up? Imagine going through all this trouble, only to have your date never arrive. I checked my hair in the mirror for the 100th time, and still, not a single strand was out of place. My lipstick was perfect. I couldn't find a single thing wrong, but I couldn't shake the pervasive uneasiness that penetrated my very being. I heard rapping at the door. For a moment my tension eased. Confidently, I strode to the entryway, and turned the knob to welcome our companions for the evening. Instead, I saw my father, blood pouring down his face, with an empty expression. I awoke in a cold sweat. Ella was sitting at the foot of my bed, with her hand on my leg. She already had her hair up in rollers, still wearing one of her nightgowns, but had foregone the dressing gown this particular morning. Time to get up, sleepyhead. It's already 7. I thought their game started at 9, I bemoaned, burying my face under my pillows. That is true, but you went to bed last night without taking off your makeup or setting your hair. We've got a lot of work to do. On top of all that, Mom's only working a half day today, so unless you want to have a conversation with her about your outfit, I suggest you get up. Don't forget, Missy, this was all your idea. Ella pulled the covers off of me, revealing my date outfit from the night before. I don't know how I ever managed to sleep in that crinoline. It was so stiff and scratchy. Ella unzipped my dress, and handed me the same dressing gown I'd worn the day before. After she left the room, I stripped down to my underwear, and threw on the gown. Following her instructions, I went to the bathroom, and used her cold cream to remove the smudged mess that was the corpse of the previous night's makeup. Through foggy eyes, I examined my reflection in the mirror while I brushed my teeth. My hair was a wreck. The ponytail hairpiece was left on my bed. Even without it, my hair still held that girlish wave, and did nothing to detract from my feminine appearance. Ella left a set of clean undergarments in the bathroom for me, and when I left, I was wearing a new mint green bra and panty set, and a matching camisole. In Ella's room, she'd already tossed several outfits on the bed. By then, she was already dressed in a long-sleeved black and white, checkered, button-down blouse, and a gray, knee-length pencil skirt. Still barefoot, she held several pieces up to my body, weighing the virtues and detriments of each combination. She settled on a short-sleeved, white button-down, with a little pointed collar, and a sky-blue circle skirt. I dressed in a half-slip and crinoline, then the outfit she decided on, and once again, I sat at her vanity table. She instructed me to just use a light dusting of powder, a soft eyeshadow with natural eyeliner, mascara, and soft, neutral, pink lips. She did the same for herself, and after brushing out her set into a stylish page boy, she worked her magic on me, and once again, I wore a perky ponytail, curling smoothly into a little spiral at the tip. After donning a pair of bobby socks, and lacing up a black and white pair of saddle shoes, I was ready for a day out and about. Ella teased, "Is this style to your liking, mademoiselle?" I retorted, sarcasm dripping from every word, "My bangs aren't as fluffy as yesterday, but it'll do." Don't get huffy with me. I'm not the one who wanted to get up and make myself pretty for my studies baseball game. I don't care about my studies baseball game. I care about seeing our Brooklyn Dodgers cream the Cincinnati Redlegs at Ebbets Field tonight. This getup and Andy's game are a means to an end. Also, shut up. He's not my steady. Ella pursed her lips, crossed her arms, and tapped her foot impatiently. I'm disappointed with you, Marion. Andy seems like a nice boy. It doesn't seem right, you taking advantage of him like this. I have half a mind to stay home and let you go out there on your own. Can you still see me from all the way up there on your high horse? You're one to talk, Ella. This whole thing was your idea. And don't act like you aren't champing at the bit to see Archie again. I don't know what you see in that idiot. First of all, that idiot, as you called him, is incredibly kind. I've never heard him say a cross word about anybody. Second, I wanted you to go on one date and then let the boy down gently. Girls do that kind of thing for each other all the time. I wasn't asking a lot. Except I'm not a girl, Ella. I clenched my fist tightly. My face flushed red. I screamed, "You always treat me like one of your girlfriends, when I'm not. I'm a boy. You play with my hair, and put makeup on me, and gossip about boys, and you act like it's the most normal thing in the world. Well, it's not. Now, the one time I decide to go along with it, you act like I'm the one being crazy." With tears streaming down her face, Ella shouted back, "Why wouldn't I treat you like a girl, when Archie and every other boy I know are twice the man you are? If you want to go to that stupid game, you're going to have to do it without me. Get out of my room, now, Marion." She pointed to the door. I'm surprised steam didn't come out of her ears. My insides were shredded, cut to pieces by her words. I grabbed the purse off her dresser and walked out into the living room. She slammed the door behind me. I sat on the couch in silence, crossing my legs at the knee. At first, I didn't even notice the girlish manner of my posture. Ella's words stung, probably more than she intended. Was I really only half a man? I certainly didn't look like one, and it was entirely my choice this time. I thought about my father again. Every time I did, the emotional pain was unbearable. Unable to let myself contemplate the deeper meaning of my behavior, I steadied my resolve and left the couch. I made it all the way to the door, and even got my fingertips on the doorknob before I froze in a panic, unable to go any further. I just couldn't get the courage together, so I went back to Ella's bedroom door and knocked softly. "Ella, I can't do this without you. I really need you right now." No answer. I tapped a few times with the tips of my fingernails and tried again. "Ella, please. I'm sorry. Come out, and we can talk about it." Still nothing. Not a peep. I realized then that I'd have to pull out my big gun. "Ella, I'm using my no questions asked. I need you to go with me." I heard her rustling around in there, and after a few minutes, the door opened. Her makeup was fixed, and she had her purse slung over her shoulder. "You're lucky I pinky promised. I'm going with you, but that doesn't mean I'm talking to you." I wanted to apologize over and over again, but her withering glare said, "Proceed with caution." Since we were running low on time, I kept my mouth shut. Ella wrote a short note for her mom, and we made it out the door with 15 minutes to spare. We hopped the trolley across town. It was standing room only, as it often was on the weekends. I had resigned myself to hanging onto the loop and hoping for the best, when two young men rose from their seats and offered them to us. I stood there like a confused imbecile, wondering what they were doing, when Ella thanked them politely and sat, pulling me down next to her. A few people were staring at this point, so I smiled politely and mouthed thank you. I remember feeling as though I was under the microscope of every passerby, but in reality, everyone that looked was probably thinking either lewd or romantic thoughts. We arrived at our stop, and the seas parted when Ella and I stood up. The last time I'd taken a trolley, I had to fight my way off, and even then, wound up riding for an extra stop. A person could get used to such a thing, and that thought scared me. We had to walk a few extra blocks to get to the park. I'd come to one of my brother's games on this side of town once. In our old neighborhood, they played in what basically amounted to a sandlot between a few buildings. Here, there was actual grass on the field. The lines were freshly marked, and there were actual bleachers for people to sit on while they watched. Some people think the sign of a prosperous neighborhood is a good school, or fancy restaurants, or even how many cars are parked on the road. To me, the answer lies in how nice your ball field is. I'm famished, Ella said curtly, nodding towards a hot dog cart on the corner. I'm still not talking to you, but you're buying. I opened my purse to see she'd stuffed the money her mom had left us in it, as well as some makeup to repair my face for when the occasion arose. We still had plenty of time to kill, so we ordered our food and walked around the park. I finished the hot dog in less than ladle-like time, so while I was waiting on Ella, I took off my shoes and socks and walked around the grass barefoot. Ever since I was a child, I loved the feeling of running barefoot through a field. It was something I rarely had the opportunity to experience. Anytime I could, I took full advantage. Ella! Archie's voice came ringing out across the park. In the distance, we saw him approaching with two feminine silhouettes. It was when they got close enough to see their faces that I truly started to panic. On his right was an older woman that I was not yet familiar with, but on his left was his sister, Eileen Connolly. In high school, I was invisible to Archie. He never noticed me, and he never had a reason to, but Eileen was a different story. On the social ladder, she was several rungs above me, so we had never spoken, but we were in the same homeroom all the way through middle school. I didn't know her very well, but one thing I did know was that girl had a mouth on her. Archie had dropped out of high school to work at his family's new butcher shop, but Eileen was a different story. Not only did we go to the same school before the accident, but we'd be going to the same new school next week. If she knew who I was, it was going to be a real problem. If Ella was Betty, then Eileen was Veronica. She was as sexy as a girl was allowed to be back then. We shared the same flaming red hair, though the similarities ended there. Her curly, chin-length bob featured a deep side part with the front lifting high off her scalp and swooping back down to the side. Unless school was in session, she was wearing deep red lipstick and a pencil skirt 2 fingers short of being modest. Ella, she squealed, embracing her as girls do when greeting each other. That's twice in 1 week I've seen you outside of school. This must be some kind of record. When I heard you were going on a date with my brother, I was ecstatic. He's had a crush on you forever. Archie turned 6 different shades of red. Shut up, sis, she doesn't need to hear all that. Eileen turned her attention to me and offered her hand politely. Is this what you did with my hairpiece? I shook her hand awkwardly and stuttered, hello. I'm Marion. Nice to meet you. Thanks for letting Ella borrow the ponytail. I cut my hair off a while ago, and I wanted to see what it looked like before I grew it back out, that is. Right, she said, raising an eyebrow to my clumsy response. You must be the Marion Andy's been going on about all morning. It's lovely to, meet you. Her expression was inscrutable. Well, I think your hair looks lovely, dear, the older woman said, reminding me of her presence. I'm sure it looks lovely short as well. I'd imagine you look just as lovely with your hair in curlers. She offered her hand and said, I'm Edith Barkley, Andy's mother. Nice to meet you. I shook her hand in return, nearly frozen. I managed to squeak out, nice to meet you, Mrs. Barkley. Sorry, I feel a bit out of place standing here with no shoes on. If you'll excuse me. I hurried to find a seat and slid my socks on. Mrs. Barkley giggled to herself and said, "No need for embarrassment, dear. Be young and carefree while you can." She was obviously a woman of privilege, in a nice floral print dress that perfectly matched her jacket, that perfectly matched her pillbox hat, that perfectly matched her gloves. Some people say that a matchy-matchy outfit is one of the worst fashion sins a person can commit. This woman was living proof that it could be done well. "What brings you to the park, Eileen?" Ella asked. She was just as surprised to see her as I was. Eileen replied, "Do you remember that boy I told you I was going steady with? That's Jimmy, Andy's brother. We met through Andy actually. He took me to prom last year, remember?" I remember Andy saying something about a brother last night. I had no idea they were one and the same. They must be about the same age. Only separated by an hour, Mrs. Barkley interjected. "Speaking of my beautiful babies, they should be starting soon. Shall we?" I had just managed to finish tying my laces, so I hurried along behind everyone else walking to the bleachers. The stands were about as crowded as you would expect a Saturday afternoon baseball game to be, so we had no trouble finding an area where we could all sit together. Ella was still pretty irked, so I found myself sandwiched between Mrs. Barkley and Eileen. I could see Andy tossing a ball back and forth with another boy, who I assumed was his brother. They had a similar facial structure, though the other boy was a few inches taller, and his hair cut in the same close-cropped style that nearly every boy our age had, but it was a dirty blonde, slightly lighter than Andy's brunette locks. I thought they looked spiffy in their baseball knickers, garments that always seemed out of place when I tried to wear them. From out of nowhere, far more raucous than I could have ever imagined her being, Mrs. Barkley yelled, "Let's go Sharks!" The designated time arrived, and the game was underway. At the top of the first inning, the Sharks were defending. I could infer from the exuberant cheers of Mrs. Barkley, the pitcher was her husband. He certainly had the same dapper countenance as his children, but more wizened. He threw the first pitch, a fastball, and the umpire cried, "Strike." Pitch number 2, and again, "Strike." There were only a couple dozen people watching this game, but when he threw the third strike, you'd have thought they had just won the World Series. I'll say this about Brooklyn. It doesn't matter how old you are, how much money you have, or where your family came from. We're going to tell you how we feel. The top of the first was finished, and Mr. Barkley had performed well. He struck out another poor kid, and their shortstop caught a line drive for the third out. It was time for the Sharks to swing for the fences, and the crowd was even more amped up. It was hard not to get swept up into the commotion. Andy was at bat first. He approached the plate and tapped the dust off his cleats. He readied his bat. The first pitch was thrown. There was no swing, since the pitch was wide right, but the umpire shouted, "Strike," getting my blood heated. "That's bull, ump. You couldn't call a cab." Swept up in the excitement, I'd forgotten to act as the demure young thing I appeared to be. I realized my error, and turned to Mrs. Barkley, expecting at best a dirty judgmental look, but was shocked to instead see her standing next to me, echoing my sentiments. "How'd you get a square head in that round mask?" she shouted, playfully nudging my shoulder. The next pitch beamed Andy straight in the arm, and you could have probably heard the boos 6 blocks down the road. Andy kept his composure, but I could see the fury in his expression. I imagine if he could have gotten away with it, he would have charged the mound and decked that pitcher. 2 batters later, and the other team had managed to walk one. Jimmy stepped up to bat, eliciting cheers from the ladies on both sides of me. It was the most animated I think I'd ever seen Eileen. Again, the pitch was wide right, again the umpire called strike, and again we all voiced our displeasure. The second pitch came, and it was obviously wide, but this time Jimmy swung the bat. Not only that, he swung for the fences. One home run later, and the Sharks were up by 3. Mrs. Barkley, Eileen, and I were jumping up and down with glee. Meanwhile, Archie and Ella couldn't be bothered. The two were stuck staring into each other's eyes like love-struck puppies. The game continued, and over the next 8 innings, the opposing team had managed to scrape together 4 runs, and the Sharks just couldn't seem to cross home again. It was the bottom of the 9th, and Andy was at bat, with 3 balls, 2 strikes, and 2 outs on the board. The pitch came, and this one was straight across the plate. Andy swung big, and hit a fly ball right up the middle. It was going, and the small crowd were on the edge of their seats. He started slowly trotting down to first base, never taking his eye off the ball. We all hoped that it was going to make it, but alas, it was short by about 10 feet, and landed straight in the center fielder's glove. Everyone in attendance let out a collective sigh of disappointment, but applauded his efforts nonetheless. We all made our way down to the field, while the 2 teams shook hands. The only person mad at Andy was Andy. I really screwed that one up. He took off his hat and threw it down on the ground. I half expected his dad to agree with him, but instead I was pleasantly surprised by his response. That's enough of that, son. You did your best, and that's all anyone can ask for. You boys played well today, and I'm proud of you both. I didn't know that was even a valid response from a sports dad. I'd only ever seen a man terrorize his children for their failures. You played better than I ever could, I offered, trying to comfort him. His frown instantly turned upside down, and he said, My one consolation is that I'm blessed with the presence of such a beautiful maiden. Even in defeat, he was a cornball. Shut up, nerd, his brother said in jest, pushing him playfully from behind. Be nice, Jimmy, Eileen said, admonishing him. Eileen stood on her tiptoes, and gave him a pleasant peck on the cheek. You must be the Marion I've been hearing so much about, Mr. Barkleys said, turning his attention to me. I'm glad you'll be joining us tonight. It'll give us a chance to get to know each other. Did you have any trouble getting here today? I shook his hand politely. No, sir. My brother played a few games over here several years ago. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm very excited. I saw you in the stands cheering for my boy. Always wonderful to meet another real baseball fan. You'll find no shortage of those in our home. Now, we'll be needing a shower and a change of clothes. Can't wear these knickers all day after all. I didn't think about that, Andy said, realizing his error. You girls aren't going to want to sit in our living room and wait around while we get cleaned up. Really, it's no big deal, I said, waving off their concerns. We'll have Archie to entertain us. They could come to the salon with us, Mrs. Barkley, Eileen offered, eyeing me up and down. Marion here was just talking about needing a new hairdo while she grows her hair out. Why not today? That's a wonderful idea, Mrs. Barkley exclaimed. I froze solid when I realized just what they were proposing. I tried to come up with a plausible reason not to, but my brain had stopped working. Ella took pity on me, and for the first time since our blow-up, started trying to save me from my decisions. We can't do that, Mrs. Barkley. Whispering, she said, we can't really afford it, right now. Nonsense. Mrs. Barkley was having none of it. It's my treat, of course. I live in a house full of boys. I never had a daughter to shower with the gifts a mother has to offer. I take every opportunity to share those pleasures with Eileen here when I can. Today I'll just have 3 surrogate daughters instead of 1. It's decided then. Eileen took me by the hand, and the 4 of us were off, leaving 4 silent men behind us. I think they all knew better than to argue with Mrs. Barkley. At the time, I got the impression that she was the true head of household. I didn't know exactly what to expect as we walked out of the park. It certainly wasn't a man in a black uniform and cap holding open the back door of a shiny new car. I didn't know a lot about cars back then. To be honest, I still don't really know anything about cars now, but I can say with 100% certainty that that Chrysler was the most expensive car I'd ever seen at that point, let alone ridden in. Eileen, Ella, and I piled in the back seat, with me in the middle, while Mrs. Barkley rode up front with her driver. Once our journey began, Ella leaned over and whispered into my ear, "When the hairdresser sees your hairpiece, just tell them you were sick. They won't ask too many questions, if they're polite. Just let them know you're growing it out, and they shouldn't do too much." At the time, I thought Eileen was lost in her thoughts, but I was about to find out that she was listening intently and forming a plan. After arriving at the salon, we didn't have to wait. Even with the 2 extra customers, the manager happily made room for us. I felt bad for whoever we bumped. Mrs. Barkley and Ella were taken to one side of the salon, while Eileen and I were taken to the other and seated right next to each other. A beautician, whose name I cannot remember, introduced herself to us and asked what services we were interested in, while fastening plastic capes around our necks to protect our clothes. Before I even had the opportunity to speak, Eileen answered for both of us. For me personally, I just need a trim and a fresh perm. Why fix what's not broken? Marion here has been very sick for a while though. She's on the mend now, but her hair is still very short. She's been wearing my hairpiece to cover it up, but I've been telling her short styles are in right now. All she needs is a new perm, set, and comb out, and she's a brand new girl. Isn't that right, Marion? Is there a reason you don't want a new do, for free on top of everything else? I fumbled to find any response at all that didn't end up with me going home looking like Lucille Ball, but nothing came to mind. I found myself nodding along, agreeing with whatever Eileen said, but inside, I was screaming for help at the top of my lungs. The beautician, with her bouffant hairdo, removed the hairpiece and left my hair to fall down, framing my face. She took us to the hair washing station and gave us both a thorough shampoo. With our damp tresses, we found our way back to our chairs. Her expert hands wound up my hair in a classic setting pattern, starting with a row of perm rods and wax paper rolled backwards away from my face, going from my forehead all the way back to my neck. From there, she rolled several rows down the sides, and then several more rows down the back, only leaving my bangs loose when all was said and done. Just as quickly, she did the same with Eileen. The next step in the process was adding the perm solution. It was cold, but that wasn't the worst part. The odor was so pungent that it burned in the back of my nose. I had a new level of respect for the effort girls had to put into their appearance. It was only the start of my first perm, and I was already ready for the process to be over. After both Eileen and I were thoroughly saturated, we were taken to the dryer station and left there for about 20 minutes. I tried several times to ask Eileen why she told them all that stuff, but she either couldn't hear me or just plain refused to acknowledge that she did. Back at the hair washing station, a cold neutralizing solution was poured over our perm rods and left to do its magic. Once that had processed, the solution was rinsed, and we were taken back to the salon chairs, where she expertly snipped away at both mine and Eileen's styles. Eileen's hair was simple, since all she did was clean up the ends. For me, on the other hand, the beautician took her time, snipping away at my split ends, and then cutting in the clean lines of my style. Once she was satisfied, she rolled both of us up in curlers, and it was back to the dryer for another 30 minutes. I was okay for about 5 minutes, and then the boredom crept in. I'd had enough of that for a lifetime, so I found an issue of Cosmopolitan on a little table between me and the next station. Surprisingly, I was so enthralled by an article on the coming fall fashion trends that when the beautician came to collect us, I carried the magazine with me so I could finish. Eileen's hair was brushed out first. She had the same style she walked through the door with, but marginally shorter and much fluffier. For me, there were a lot of brushstrokes to smooth the curl together, a lot of teasing to give it height, and a lot of hairspray to hold everything in place. I was the proud owner of a short bouffant style. It swept back away from my face, floating 2 inches above my scalp, while the bangs were parted deep on the right, falling halfway between my hairline and my eyebrows. The short bubble of wavy hair was cropped close to the back of my neck, and the sides fell just short of my earlobes. One thing I was certain of was that despite its length, this style could no longer be combed into anything remotely masculine. Eileen was effusive with her praise. "That coiffure is so you, Marion. It's to die for. To think, you walked in here with a year's worth of neglect, and now you're just as pretty as a picture." "Thanks," I muttered, frozen, staring into my reflection. How was I going to explain this to my mother? How was I going to get rid of it? Was I going to have to shave my head? A million questions raced through my mind, only quelled when Ella shrieked, "Oh my God, Marion! What have they done to you?" I turned to see Ella, her page boy bleached into a bright blonde. "Doesn't she look lovely?" Eileen asked, grinning from ear to ear. Mrs. Barkley came around the corner, her hair up in a fresh-set poodle updo. "I'll say she does. Short hair really suits you, Marion." "Thank you," I said, hoping not to appear rude. "All right, girls, collect your things. I'll pay the tab, and then we're going on a little shopping excursion before we meet the boys." Another short car ride later, and we had pulled up to the doors of Abraham and Strauss. The sheer immensity of the building was daunting. 5 stories on a city block, filled with clothes, home goods, and all the knickknacks and baubles one could imagine. Once inside, Mrs. Barkley had arranged for us all to meet with a tailor to get measured for our new outfits. Apparently, she and Eileen had plans to purchase new suits. They were to attend some upcoming event for the Junior League, so Ella and I were conscripted into the hunt for the perfect attire. I didn't understand why I'd need a new outfit, but Mrs. Barkley was quite insistent. After the gentleman took my measurements, I wandered around the department, hoping that I looked like I was supposed to be there. I strolled from mannequin to mannequin, not sure exactly what I was looking for. Suddenly, as though by fate itself, I came upon a bust wearing a gingham ensemble that, even with my reluctant mindset, I had to admit was delightfully precious. I couldn't take my eyes off of the display. "It's lovely, isn't it?" Mrs. Barkley had snuck up beside me. I jumped at the sound of her voice. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." "That's okay, ma'am. I was just admiring the print. It's certainly nicer than anything I've ever owned." She snapped her fingers, getting the attention of the nearby clerk, and pointed to the display. "She'll take everything on this mannequin, Javier." "Ma'am, that's too much." I waved my arms, blushing at the embarrassment of riches being thrust upon me. Especially considering it's an outfit I wasn't supposed to want in the first place. "Nonsense. I understand you were sick for a while. It sounds to me like you could use a win." "I don't want to pry into your personal business, dear. I just want to make sure you're okay. I know it's a bit premature, but my son is quite taken by you." I don't blame him. My face flushed crimson. "I don't understand why. I'm a touch awkward, ma'am. Maybe in how you carry yourself, but believe me, you're a pretty girl blossoming into a beautiful young woman. He'd be lucky to have you. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask, okay?" I nodded in agreement, and we rejoined Ella and Eileen, who'd made their selections. "Where should I have the packages sent, Mrs. Barkley?" Javier asked, clipboard in hand. "You can send my purchases to my residence, Javier. As far as the girls' things." She paused and waited for us to answer. "You can send them all to my address, Javier," Eileen answered for us. She explained, just to keep things simple. "We only live a few blocks from each other, and I'm sure Archie would love any excuse to pay Ella a visit." At this point, Eileen was still a mystery to me. Whatever the case, I was just glad a dress wouldn't be delivered to our apartment with my name on it. Almost as if an afterthought, she came up with a plan. "Actually, girls, tonight we could have a sleepover, and then you two could come to church with my family in the morning, if you'd like." "I'd love to have you. We could do each other's hair, talk about boys, tell each other secrets." Her tone was sweet, but I knew then and there that she wasn't asking. "That sounds wonderful, Eileen," I said calmly. Really though, I was terrified of what she'd do if I said no. "Sure, Eileen," Ella said, shooting me a side-eyed glance. Mrs. Barkley gave a nostalgic monologue on gal pals while we trailed along behind her. She didn't know it, but the tension between the three of us was as thick as a week-old stew. When we were seated in the back seat of the car again, Eileen smiled at us both, but never said a single word for the entire drive. Ella, and I in complete disbelief, huddled up together in the back seat. I knew there was no easy way to just walk away from all of it by then. The only real option we had was to see it through to the end. When we pulled up outside of Ebbets Field, all the fears, insecurities and anxieties I had been experiencing went right out the window. The majestic structure stood tall in the north of town, and was one of the main reasons I was proud to be a Brooklyn native. We still had an hour before the first pitch, so I took my time walking to the gates, taking in every sensation, from the bustle of the crowd to the smell of peanuts. Excitement was in the air. The Dodgers were having their best season ever, after all. Out front, Archie and the Barkley men were waiting for us. "Your hair!" Andy exclaimed when he saw me approaching. I blushed and tried to hide behind my hands. "Is it that bad?" He took my hands in his and looked deep in my eyes. "Hey there, Dolly. Don't cry. I was just surprised, is all. It's real nifty. You look great, Marion." I wasn't crying. For some reason, his compliments made me feel warm inside. I looked back into his eyes, and felt a comfort wash over me. I fluffed the ends proudly, and already knowing his answer, asked him, "Do you really think it looks keen, Andy?" "Of course, doll. You're even more gorgeous than before." Anytime I was afraid of being read, Andy was there to remind me just how silly that idea was. His father cleared his throat loudly. I assume he was trying to get our attention, while embarrassing us as little as possible. We didn't notice till that moment, but everyone was staring at us. For a minute there, I felt like the only people in the world were Andy and me. "Come along now, children. Let's get to our seats." In the park we found our box behind home plate. It was the best view in the house, as far as I'm concerned. Sure, I'd never catch a foul ball or a home run there, but let's be honest, I was never going to do that anyway. Nothing was particularly special about the seats other than the color. I think it just felt special to have a tiny little section of 10 chairs that were just for us. The crowd was electric. I actually felt bad for the Redlegs. When another team came to Brooklyn, we let them know exactly where they were. You couldn't find better fans. It gave a new meaning to the term home field advantage. I took a seat between Andy and his father, setting my purse beneath me on the ground. The two of them talked over me, while I kept my eyes on the field, eager for the game to begin. Jimmy and Eileen had gone to grab refreshments for everyone, so Ella seized the opportunity. "Marion, I need to powder my nose. Would you join me, please?" Playing my part, I grabbed my bag, and we headed to the concourse. Once out of earshot, Ella said, "I'm so sorry about this, Marion. How are we going to explain your hair when we get home tomorrow? Wait, are we actually going to stay at that psycho's house tonight?" Eileen's not a psycho. She's my friend. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for everything. If she did recognize you, I don't see why she'd want to humiliate you. Sure, she's got a fierce reputation, but she's not malicious. We'll stay there tonight and see what's what. Besides, it will give us some time to figure out what to do about your look. If you're sure, I'll go along with it. There's a payphone over there. We should call your mom. I fished a nickel out of my purse, and we dialed the number. Ella's mom answered, but I only heard one half of the conversation. "Hey Mom, we're at Ebbets Field now. I know I should have talked to you about it face to face, but with your schedule there wasn't really a good time. Yeah, Marion's with me. He's having a good time. Yes, we're safe. No, their parents are here. So's Eileen, she's doing well. Actually, she invited me to stay the night tonight. Marion's going to stay with the boys over at Andy's. Okay, I promise. Love you. Marion loves you too. See you tomorrow." Ella hung up the receiver. "We're covered until tomorrow. We should hurry back to our seats before someone comes looking for us." All through the national anthem, my mind was in 1,000 other places, but it was a different story once Sandy Koufax took to the mound. "Where's Nook?" I asked. "I'm not sure, sweetheart," Mr. Barkley answered. "Don Newcomb hasn't played in the last few games. I haven't read anything about an injury, so I'd assume he's probably resting up for the National League Championship. But Koufax isn't even a starter usually. I hope everything is okay." It's funny to think how I thought so little of him back then, when he'd go on to have one of the greatest careers in the history of baseball. "Looks like you've brought us a real fan, son," Mr. Barkley said, patting his boy on the back. "I know you two were preoccupied with your date, so you probably missed it. Erskine didn't do so great last night. I imagine that's why they're giving the youngsters a chance." At the top of the first inning, Johnny Temple made his way to the plate. Koufax first pitched a ball. The second go-round he followed it with a strike, right down the middle. Koufax tried for another fastball after, but Temple got a hold of it and hit a fly ball right up the middle. He didn't quite get all of it though, and Snyder managed to get underneath it. That was the first out. When Burgess stepped up next, they played a similar game of cat and mouse, but this time, Koufax managed to strike him out. I got a little nervous when Klasiski managed to take a base, but my worries proved unfounded when Furillo caught another fly ball to send the Redlegs back onto the field. The bottom of the first started with a double play by Gillum. After that, Fowler managed to strike out Reese, but threw a wild pitch on Snyder, so Gillum was able to steal third. One fly ball later, and Gillum was able to bring it home for the first run on the board. Right after that, Snyder was still on first. Furillo was at bat. Fowler threw one, and Furillo didn't even try to mess with it. I think Fowler had something to prove then, but failed to make his point. His second pitch was straight over the plate. Furillo wasn't having any of it though. He made solid contact with the ball, sending it right up the middle. Going, gone. Not a single but was in its seat because Carl Furillo had just hit a 2-run home run. I was jumping up and down, clapping my hands together, when I turned to look up at Andy. Just as swept up in the moment as I was, he leaned down and planted a big fat kiss on my lips, and then pulled me tight into his chest. "Andy, your parents are right there," I said, nodding back to his father. If I could have seen behind me, I would have seen Mr. Barkley grinning proudly. The next few innings, neither team would give ground, but there was a ferocity to Koufax. He didn't let a single runner on base. In the fourth, Jackie Robinson managed to steal his way to another run for the Dodgers. For the rest of the game, Koufax was striking out hitters left and right. Through the use of good fundamentals, the Dodgers had managed to score 3 more runs. In the ninth, when Bridges hit a pop-up to short, Pee Wee Reese easily made the catch, and that was it. The Brooklyn Dodgers beat the Cincinnati Redlegs in a blowout 7-0. We destroyed them. Again, not a soul was sitting down. People were throwing their hats in the air and cheering long after the last play had been made. I must have gotten swept up in the moment, because this time, when I locked eyes with Andy, it was me grabbing him by the cheeks and planting a big wet one on his lips. When I remembered myself, for the 100th time that day, everyone was staring at us. "Just a little thank you for bringing me today," I whispered, shyly, my cheeks burning red. After battling our way through the mob, everyone said their goodbyes outside. Andy had pulled me aside to have a private conversation. "I'm really glad you came today, Marion. I have to admit, I thought I blew it last night, but here you are. It's like a dream come true. You're sweet, Andy, but I'm no dream. You could do so much better than me. Trust me." I saw the sadness on his face, but he was trying to keep it together as was expected of young men back then. Honestly, my heart broke a little. "That's nonsense. You're the ginchiest girl I've ever met. You're just so pretty. Wait, sorry, you're more than that. You're smart. You like science fiction. You love baseball. We have so much in common. Just say you'll go out with me one more time. Please. If you say no again, I just might die." He was being melodramatic, sure, but who isn't at that age? With all those hormones raging, everything is just so big. Inside, I was being melodramatic too. I wanted out of my predicament, but I didn't want to hurt the boy either. "I'll think about it. Just give me a little time to decide." His face lit up, and he pulled me into a tight embrace. "You're the best, Marion. I'll call you later this week." Him calling me was not part of the plan. I'd definitely have to worry about that when the time came. Whatever the case, I'd have to discuss it with Ella later. Ella, Eileen, and I were saying our goodbyes before we walked to the trolley stop. Archie had decided to stay behind for a boys' night since we were having a girls' night. "Are you sure I can't call you girls a cab?" Mrs. Barkley asked for the 100th time. "I just don't feel right about leaving you to fend for yourselves." "We're okay, Mrs. Barkley," Eileen assured her. "We live in Williamsburg. There aren't too many stops. It's still daylight out, anyway. Thanks so much for everything today." Ella and I echoed her sentiments, and after a prolonged goodbye, we headed to the trolley stop on the corner. Once we got to the stop, Ella looked back to make sure we were out of earshot, and then she went off. "What the hell was that, Eileen? Were you trying to torture Marion?" After the outburst, she realized that everyone at the stop was staring at the three of us, so she quickly zipped her lips. The trolley didn't pull up too much later, and we were on our way back to the neighborhood. I had a good mind to stay on when we got to Eileen's stop, and just ride it the rest of the way back to our apartment, but I didn't plan far enough ahead to get past Magda and out of my costume. When we got to the butcher shop, instead of going in the main entrance, we went through a side door and up a staircase to the Connolly family's apartment. Is that you, Eileen? Her mother called out in her thick Scottish brogue. Come to the kitchen before you go to your room. Coming, mother, she shouted back, slipping her shoes off at the doorway. We followed her example, and left our shoes in the pile by the back door. I've got Ella and Marion from down the street with me. The Connolly household wasn't dirty by any means, but it wasn't exactly organized either. On the hutch in the entryway alone, there was a toy car, a feather duster, 2 sets of keys, a full bottle of Coke, and a rubber chicken for some reason. I hadn't seen them yet, but I heard what sounded like a mob of small children pitter-pattering across the floor. Navigating through the maze of unpacked boxes and stacks of newspapers, we found our way to the kitchen, where Mrs. Connolly was waiting with a baby on her hip. Ella dearie, how are you? She said with a cigarette hanging from her lips. She pulled Ella tightly into her oversized bosom. I tried not to snicker when Ella looked like she was going to suffocate. She was a shapely lady, not cursed with an excess of shame. Her hair was up in rollers under a hairnet, and she wore a floral print muumuu. How's your mother doing? Did you all enjoy that corned beef last week? Thanks for asking, Mrs. Connolly. She's fine, and it was delicious. Ella was always so polite. I knew for a fact that she didn't want to be there at that moment, but not another soul had any reason to think otherwise. And who do we have here? Mrs. Connolly asked, turning her attention to me. Eileen answered for me. Mother, this is Marion. She and her mother live with the Kowalskis. Oh, right. I don't know why, but I thought I remembered there being a boy there though. Oh well. Obviously that wasn't right. It's nice to meet you, dearie. She pulled me into her bosom this time. She might have been underdressed, but she was certainly wearing an ample amount of perfume. That reminds me. A delivery boy dropped off some packages for you a little while ago. I hope you're not taking advantage of Mrs. Barkley. Eileen shrugged her off. I'm not, Mother. She's just a nice woman who likes to lavish gifts on people. Who am I to stop her? Only some of those things are mine anyway. The rest are for Marion and Ella. I just had them deliver them here, since the store already had our address on file. Okay. I suppose that's fine. You had better write her a nice thank you note for this though. Of course, Mother. I always do. Anyway, if it's okay with you, Ella and Marion are going to stay here tonight and go to church with us in the morning. We're going to have a slumber party. You know, do each other's hair, talk about boys. That kind of thing. I don't see why not, Mrs. Barkley said, stroking her chin. As long as their mothers are fine with it. Thank you, Mother. Eileen said, kissing her mom on the cheek. Can we order pizza for dinner? I suppose. You lot run along now. I've got a dozen more bottles to boil. We stepped into the hallway where 3 heads of curly red hair came out of a room and blew past our waist in a blur, giggling the entire way. When we stepped through the door to Eileen's room, it was obvious she was a different animal from the rest of her family. Everything had a place. Her bed was perfectly made up, hospital corners and all. It was the quintessential teenage girl's bedroom, decorated in lace and frills. Okay, enough bullshit, Eileen. Ella said as soon as the door closed behind her. I'd never heard her be so vulgar before. What is going on? Why did you Shanghai Marion into getting that haircut? Are you trying to punish him for something? Yeah, I said, joining in the interrogation. I thought you didn't even know I existed. What have you got against me? Why are you torturing me? Torturing you? Eileen was shocked at the accusation. I'm not torturing you. You look amazing. Of course I know you exist. We were in the same classes in middle school. You were the only other kid in our grade with fiery red hair. We even had a few classes together in high school, before my family moved to Williamsburg. I think it was serendipitous that you followed behind. Marion, I love you. You love me? Ella wasn't having any of it. You love him? That's insane. You don't even know him. Not romantic love, Ella. I mean, I love what you're doing. I love the way you look. It's all so thrilling. From here on out, I want to take care of you and guide you along your path. You know, Helen Leibovitz and I used to whisper about you in homeroom. You were just so pretty. The first time we saw you in 5th grade, we debated for hours on whether you were a boy or a girl. She thought she'd won. She said it was obvious, since you were wearing pants to school, but I wasn't convinced. I knew I was right when you turned up this morning, looking like a young Irish Doris Day. When I heard about your accident, I was terrified that it had ruined that pretty face of yours. Instead, you came back from it even more beautiful. That kind of thing just doesn't happen. It's fate. You're not right, Eileen. You're insane, is what you are. I might be wearing this getup, but underneath it beats the heart of a red-blooded male. I tried to sound commanding, but I was so flustered, my argument squeaked out in a far less than intimidating fashion. I'm not talking about how you look, darling. Sure, I'd spend hours sitting behind you in class imagining how cute you'd look with twin plaits in your hair. I mean, when the beautician asked what you wanted, and you fumbled like a buffoon, I saw an opportunity to help you along your way. You needed a style that suited you, and now you have one. You couldn't wear my ponytail forever anyway. I was going to want it back sooner or later. But I didn't want a new style, Eileen. All this was supposed to be temporary. It's true, Eileen. It started as a bit of fun, and then Archie saw him by pure chance. Somehow it led to him asking us on a double date with him and Andy. It just got out of hand. I'm sure my stupid brother was the instigator, but Marion came out today looking like just another teeny bopper of her own volition. That was just to see the baseball game, Eileen, I said defensively. I took advantage of Andy. Believe me. I'm regretting that now. A sardonic smile crossed her lips. So then, what was that kiss? He kissed me after that home run. He just got swept up in the moment. Not that one, Marion. The second one. You kissed him. Wait, she's right actually, Ella said, turning her focus back to me. We all saw that, Marion. You did kiss him unprovoked. What was that all about? That was... I tried to come up with a halfway decent excuse, but that well was dry, so I wound up reusing one. I got swept up in the moment too. Ella, who had fully switched sides at this point, crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow. It seemed to me you got swept up by him. Not the ball game. I mean, I don't know a lot about baseball myself, but after the trouncing the Dodgers gave the Redlegs, the ending was sort of anticlimactic. I could literally feel my face burning crimson. She's right, sweetie, Eileen joined in. You swooned, the same way I swoon when Jimmy kisses me like that. I searched for any other reason, other than the one I didn't like. There was a cognitive dissonance between the person I thought I was supposed to be, and the person I'd been since my date the previous night. Unable to respond, I froze up, and a single tear streamed down my cheek. Don't cry, baby, Eileen said, embracing me. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Ella wrapped her arms around both of us, and we sat in a group hug for a few minutes, while I processed exactly what was going on. When she finally released me, Eileen offered, "You know, you're stuck here till tomorrow afternoon. You might as well relax and enjoy the slumber party. Leave tomorrow's problems for then." I wiped my face and silently nodded in agreement. As a group, we decided what kind of pizza we wanted, and Eileen placed the order. I'd never known anyone who had a phone in their bedroom, but Eileen was the kind of girl who got what she wanted, so it didn't surprise me. She put on a record, and we spent the rest of the evening talking about people we went to school with and doing our nails. When bedtime approached, Eileen loaned us 2 nightgowns to sleep in, and the girls taught me how to set my hair for the evening. I had most of my hair rolled up in pin curls following the lines of my style, and 2 little curlers holding my bangs taut above my forehead. We washed off our makeup, and I was shown how to wrap my hair in a chiffon scarf to protect it while I slept. In true slumber party fashion, we were up for another 2 hours after the lights went out. We couldn't stop joking around and asking each other silly questions. I'm not even sure exactly when I drifted off. The hairpins did take a little getting used to, but soon enough we were sound asleep, and tomorrow's problems would have to wait for me to wake. Sunday morning, I awoke to a breakfast of sugar smacks and coffee. Mrs. Connolly seemed to always have her hands full, so it was no surprise that she fixed the family's morning meal by taking the path of least resistance. Still, I thought it nice that their whole clan, all 8 of them, had breakfast together. Archie had stumbled in pretty late, well after we went to sleep, and it showed. He shoved his cereal into his mouth in heaping spoonfuls, while watching his father go on and on about how they arrived in the U.S. It was my first time meeting Mr. Connolly, but I could tell that it was a story he told 1,000 times before. Maybe it was how expressive he was, waving his giant arms around. Maybe it was the way his eyes lit up when he got to his favorite parts. It was probably because of the way his kids mouthed the words along with him, not missing a beat. And we came here, just before the stock market crashed. I had big dreams when I moved here, and I guess the Lord saw fit to remind me that the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. Anyway, I worked as a day laborer down at the fish market for a little while, and slowly but surely we saved up enough to put a down payment on a little butcher shop. We must have been ready, because that's when this fella came along. He put his hand on Archie's shoulder and gave him a loving shake. Loving as it wasn't gentle, and Archie dropped the next bite on the floor before it could reach his mouth. Mr. Connolly continued, undeterred, our family kept growing, and with it, so did our little shop. We were running out of room both upstairs and downstairs, so we had to move over here a couple of years ago. Now the family and the business are both doing well. I'm so blessed. That's very interesting, Mr. Connolly. Ella was always so polite with adults. It's probably why she could get away with murder. She winked to her beau picking up his cereal from the floor, and said, I can't say I'm upset you came here when you did. I don't doubt that, lassie, he replied, chuckling from his bouncing belly. I'm glad you'll be joining us for services this morning. Are you girls Episcopalian? Ella answered, No sir, we're both Catholic. I added, the bad kind of Catholic though. You know, the ones who only go to church on Christmas, Easter, when someone gets married, or when somebody dies. Mr. Connolly must have thought I was hilarious, because he laughed so hard that he passed gas right there at the table. His family groaned in unison, almost as if to lament this again. They all acted put out, but it was obvious to anyone that there was a lot of love in this household. Okay, then, he said, after calming down. We need to be out the door by 10:45. Boys, let the girls have the WC first. The 3 little children with the shaggy red hair all made their displeasure known, but their father was quick to quell them with a pearl of wisdom. Fellas, a lot more work goes into a lady's Sunday best. It's only the fair and gentlemanly thing to do, suffering through a little lukewarm water. It builds character. He wasn't lying. It was an incredible amount of work to get ready for church. I was under the impression that it was a day of rest, but the girls had to put in more work on Sunday morning than on the average school day. After the three of us each took a quick shower in rapid succession, we snuck back into Eileen's room to get ready, letting the rest of the family have their turn in the bathroom. Eileen and Ella quickly dressed themselves and did their makeup while I bathed, so they could work together to get me up to snuff as quickly as possible. I can't say I wasn't relieved that someone else had to handle the task of my makeup, but I was also a little hurt that Ella didn't think I was capable enough to have it finished before we needed to leave. Both girls were basically ready to go, the seams of their stockings straight, and they were wearing the dresses Mrs. Barkley had bought them, only missing the few finishing touches that complete an ensemble. Eileen was wearing a green floral number with a swan neckline, made of organza and chiffon. She wore her bob as she usually did, though a touch more sculpted than normal. Ella switched it up and pulled her hair up into a short ponytail. She looked amazing in her new dress. It was a black, pink, and white linen confection decorated with lace, a scalloped neckline and sleeves, buttons up the front, and a little bow accent at the neck. All of that over what I could only assume was a very voluminous petticoat. Strangely, I hoped I looked half as good as them when they'd finished. I told myself it was to keep up my ruse, but in actuality, I was starting to become a little jealous. They fastened me into a full girdle first, flattening everything in front. Then, they showed me how to affix the stocking to each of the little garter tabs, in case I needed to adjust in the ladies' room later. Ella wrapped the corset around me, and with no hesitation, started cutting me in half again. After I stepped into my own petticoat, they both helped guide my new dress over my head, careful to avoid my face so as not to muss the wonderful makeup application Ella had created. Eileen was thorough in her annotations of what she was doing with my hair, from taking out the pins to brushing out the curlers. "I'm going to go ahead and pin your hat on, since we're building your hairstyle around it today," she explained. Once everything was in place, I was finally allowed to go to the floor mirror and get a good look at my semi-formal attire. One thing I could say for certain was that Mrs. Barkley had excellent taste. The short-sleeved, rose, gingham shirtwaist dress was absolutely gorgeous. It generously flattered my svelte figure, decorated with a simple black belt at the waist. It buttoned all the way up the front to the crew neckline just beneath my painted visage. My hair was smoothed down on top, falling to my ears with little dainty curls at the ends, and topped with a little crescent hat that perfectly matched the color and print of my dress. Humility is a virtue, and one that I was lacking in that particular moment. I thought I looked sophisticated and radiant. It was almost time to leave, so Ella put on a pink circle hat and slid a hat pin through its lace-covered wire frame, holding it firmly in place. Eileen placed a simple undecorated white caplet on the crown of her head and dug through a drawer, retrieving 3 pairs of wrist-length white gloves, one for each of us. We headed to the foyer, where Ella and I stepped into our conservative pumps while Eileen searched through a sea of shoes till she found the particular pair she was looking for. Even with the generous head start, the rest of the family was already outside waiting for us. I was sure that when we walked in the chapel, the entire congregation was going to turn in their seats to chastise and shame me for having the audacity to show up in the house of God dressed in such a queer manner. Of course, nothing of the sort happened. It was rather uneventful and reminded me a lot of our own rituals, though there was much less Latin. I half expected grape juice when it came time for communion, but I can confirm they used real wine, the same as we did. After the service, they held a spaghetti lunch in the fellowship hall for anyone who cared to join. The mood was pleasant enough, but I overheard a lot of women gossiping about what each other were wearing, and whoever's husband had a drinking problem, confirming many of the rumors I'd heard about Protestants. Whatever the case, they weren't hurting anyone, and the food was surprisingly delicious. The comfort of the pleasant escape wouldn't last too long, though. With every tick of the clock, I was edging closer to having to deal with the consequences of my decisions. "Are you sure I can't drive you girls?" Mr. Connolly asked for the 30th time. We had just returned to their apartment to collect our belongings, and I was finally going to go home and get back into boy clothes. Ella reassured him, "No, we're fine, Mr. Connolly. I make this walk all the time for my mom. It'll take you longer to warm up your car than for us to get there, sir. I promise we'll be fine." Okay. You don't have to twist my arm," he said. "I'll be picking you up tomorrow for school though." "I insist. I'm taking Eileen anyway, and like you said, you're just down the street." "You don't have to do that, sir," I said, trying to think of any excuse I could, but coming up short. Unfortunately, he just took this as me being polite. "No, dear, I insist." He put a finger to his nose and winked, saying, "You don't have to tell your mothers. You girls can keep the bus fare for a treat at the soda fountain." I attempted another protest, but Ella interrupted, "Thank you, sir. We'll see you then whispered, "We'll figure something out later." We said our goodbyes to their family before Eileen, and Archie walked us outside for a more personal farewell. Archie and Ella were busy melting into each other's eyes, and whispering sweet nothings to each other, leaving me and Eileen to have one last private conversation. "You should try out for cheerleading tomorrow, Marion," she suggested, as though it was the most normal thing in the world. "You're certainly pretty enough." "Why would I do that, Eileen?" I couldn't believe it. It was like every protestation I'd voiced had gone in one ear and out the other. "I'm still a boy under this getup, remember?" "You say that, but it's obvious to anyone with one eye and half of a brain that you're a girl, dear. You'll see it soon enough." If I didn't know better, I'd have still thought she was trying to torture me, but her expression was so loving and genuine. She'd been nothing but kind to me. Out there, absolutely, but kind nonetheless. "Okay, sure." I was at a loss for words. We shared a warm embrace. I finally managed to pry Ella away from her new beau. We made the short journey home, where I expected Magda to be waiting for us. I imagined scenes from some cheesy spy movie where the sidekick distracts the enemy agent, while the hero sneaks in to get a MacGuffin through some clandestine means. Ella was pretty insistent that we just tell everyone the truth, and at worst we'd get a stern talking to, and our ruse would be one of those funny stories people tell years down the line. I wasn't convinced though. I was sure Archie's dad might very well kill me for spending the night in his daughter's bedroom. I was also convinced I'd be the laughingstock of the entire neighborhood once word got out. One reason I didn't want to say out loud though, was that I really didn't want to do anything that could hurt Andy. He'd been nothing but a perfect gentleman, and he really didn't deserve the social fallout of my decisions. I'd resolved to run as fast as possible to my bedroom once we swung open the door to our apartment, however my worries proved unnecessary. I was just about to slam my bedroom door behind me when I realized there was no sign of Magda in the apartment. Ella called out from the kitchen. She left a note, "And money for pizza. I don't know about you, but I'm already sick of pizza." I kicked off my heels and went back to the kitchen. What's going on? Looks like Mrs. Schwartz, next door, had some kind of heart attack or something. Mom took her to the hospital. Oh. Well, that's terrible. I wanted to say it was fortunate, but realized that it was extremely selfish to be grateful for someone else's misfortune. I'm going to wash my face, and then head straight down to Floyd's. The barber shop is closed. It's Sunday, remember? Of course it is. I hung my head in defeat. I guess I'm going to jump in the shower and wash out these curls, at least. You've got a perm, Marion. If you wash your hair and don't set it right after, you're going to be left with a wild, kinky mess, and then you really will look strange. So, what am I supposed to do? Just wash your face, put on some comfortable clothes, and I'll try and sort you out. I did as instructed, and found myself sitting on the floor in my pajamas, in front of Ella, who was on the couch, setting my pin curls. On the T.V, the Dodgers were playing the Cardinals, but my thoughts were elsewhere. In the morning, Mr. Connolly would be taking the girls to school. I couldn't very well go out to meet them in my slacks and button-down. Sneaking out early was an option, but playing the movie all the way through in my mind, Mr. Connolly was such a sweetheart, he'd probably worry about my well-being and check up on me when he dropped off Ella and Eileen. Imagine if he found me at school, far more masculinely attired than the last time he'd seen me. I'd not only dread that conversation, but also we'd be having it in front of my new homeroom, or worse, school administration. Of course, that all seems incredibly improbable now, but at the time, I was setting personal records for anxiety levels. All done. Ella had just finished tying up my hair with a chiffon scarf. What are you going to do about tomorrow? I think the best course of action would be for me to pack a gym bag full of boy clothes, and to change once we get to school. That way, Mr. Connolly will have no idea. I don't know, Marion. What about your hair? Whatever, Ella. I'll figure it out when I get there. After a deep breath, she took my hands in hers, and looked me straight in the eye. Marion, this isn't sustainable. I think it's time to cut our losses, and just tell the truth. It'll be fine. The Connollys seem to have a sense of humor. They'll probably find it funny, and Andy can never know. I was screaming. It came out of nowhere. For reasons I wasn't ready to admit to myself, the idea of Andy finding out terrified me more than anything else. We'll stick to my plan, Ella. I got up from the floor and went to my bedroom, locking it behind me. I don't know who won the ball game, and I never had dinner. I just cried under the covers until I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke to find Ella already up and dressed, making breakfast. Good morning, she said quietly when I walked into the kitchen. Sit and eat, please. We've got a busy morning. She made flapjacks and syrup, my favorite. I'm sorry about my outburst yesterday. I know you're just trying to help. I understand. It's a lot. I do feel responsible for badgering you into doing it in the first place. I should have known better. There's not a lot we can do about it now. Let's just get through today, and we'll deal with the rest as it comes. I'm afraid you're right though. Sooner or later, we are going to have to tell the truth. Maybe, but you were also right. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. She hugged me tightly from behind and kissed me on top of the head while I sat in my chair stuffing pancakes into my face. After the delicious meal, we went to her room to get dressed for the day. There weren't a lot of options for girls back then when it came to school clothes. The dress codes were pretty restrictive, leaving them all looking like young professionals until the weekend. Plaid was the print of the day. Ella was dressed in a green plaid, sleeveless, button-down dress that fit snugly, but not suggestively, all the way to beneath her knee. Jewelry wasn't allowed, so she accessorized with a dark green headband and a pair of black loafers. I was wearing a calf-length, red plaid, swing skirt, topped by a plain white sweater set. The knit top had short sleeves, and she'd hung its matching cardigan from my shoulders, so I wouldn't have to worry about getting too hot during a warm, late summer day. I slipped on a pair of bobby socks, and over those, a pair of brown saddle shoes. Girls weren't technically allowed to wear makeup, but it was an open secret that they all cheated. The real rule was don't go overboard. We both were wearing a layer of powder foundation and single coat of mascara. She arranged my hair back to its perfectly sculpted frozen style and found 2 dainty watches, one for the both of us. Dressed, I went back to my room and stuffed a change of clothes into my gym bag. Ella and I barely had to wait down at the street since Mr. Connolly pulled up with Eileen right on time. I was grateful, because the fewer of my neighbors that saw me dolled up as I was, the better. Eileen was picture perfect as always, in her lettered sweater with its giant W stitched to the front. She was a varsity cheerleader this year, after all. Got plans after school, do ye? Mr. Connolly inquired, noting my bag as we slid into the back seat of his Ford. Did I convince you to try out for cheerleading, after all, Marion? Eileen asked excitedly, her face dripping with joy. Yeah, something like that, I lied, buckling my seatbelt. The ride to school wasn't all that far, though to me it felt like we were moving at light speed. I tried to formulate a plan for when we arrived, but I didn't yet know the campus, so in reality, I was just guessing. First day back, girls, Mr. Connolly said with a smile as we pulled up in front of the building. Best behavior and all. Marion and Ella, I'll see you in the morning. Eileen, I'll see you at home for dinner tonight. Good luck today. As we were getting out of the car, it occurred to me that we were going to have to do this dance every morning until I put a stop to it. The idea of coming clean was looking better by the minute. I quickly scurried up the stairs, before anyone could talk to me, and inside, I searched for a single occupancy bathroom only to find that at this particular school, they didn't exist, at least not in any area officially accessible to students. I could peer into the teacher's lounge through a large window on the door. Inside there was a bathroom, and from what I could see, no teachers to stop me. I started to open the door when behind me, I heard a booming voice shout, "Can I help you, young lady?" Yes, sir, This man was just plain scary. He was certainly the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen in an argyle vest and bow tie. I'm new, my mother got me registered, but I still haven't been assigned a schedule, and I have no idea where to go to get it. Well, it's certainly not in there. That's the teacher's lounge and it's off limits. I'm Mr. Williams, the vice principal. If you'd follow me, I'll take you to the main office. I'm not sure how you missed it though. It's right by the entrance. Sorry, sir. I'm such a ditz sometimes. I followed the gruff bald man to the front desk. He said his hellos to the secretary, then introduced me. What's your name, dear? Marion Ryan, sir. I found Ms. Ryan lost in the halls. She needs her schedule, so she can be on her way. Oh, right. Ms. Ryan, the secretary said with a flash of recognition. You're the one who had that horrible accident, right? Yes, I answered, nervously. Right. We have so many new students, but I recall yours because it was a special case. It's not every day a student misses freshman year in its entirety, but still manages to pass the finals. You're pretty bright, aren't you? I certainly hadn't been for the previous few days. Anyway. She started flipping through several sheets of paper and found what she was looking for. Well, this won't do. It looks like someone checked the wrong box somewhere along the line. They've got you in shop class and boys' gym. Let me correct that error, and we'll have you on your way. She used a pen to cross out my third and fourth periods, and then scribbled in the room numbers for my new electives. Home economics for third period, and you'll be with Ms. Kruger for gym. Do you have your uniform? No, I guess I don't, I said, glancing down at my gym bag. No problem. What are you, a 2? I just nodded my head, having no idea what she was talking about. She returned with a stack of folded, bundled cloth and handed it to me. With a warm smile, she said, "Good luck today, honey," and shooed me out the door. Mr. Williams insisted on walking me to my homeroom, where everyone was already seated and the teacher was taking attendance. I quietly found an empty desk, hoping not to attract any unwanted attention, but given I was escorted to class by the VP of the school, of course all eyes were on me, some lingering longer than others. Marion Ryan? The question hung in the air. I was frozen. I must have thought of 100 different plans, and none of them were useful. I almost flung myself out of the window, but I realized I'd die of shame long before the fall would have killed me, since this particular classroom was on the first floor. The sound of a forcefully cleared throat alerted me to the fact that Mr. Williams was still standing in the doorway, and he still had his sights set firmly on me. I raised my hand slowly, fighting back tears. This was it. If I showed up to class the next day in a pair of trousers, with my hair chopped off, I wouldn't fool anyone. I couldn't find a single good decision to make. Our teacher handed out locker assignments, and we were sent off to find them. After weaving through a few winding hallways, I found mine, which fortuitously just happened to be right beside Eileen's. "Hey Marion," she squealed. "Looks like we're neighbors. We can meet here during lunch period every day. Who did you get for gym?" I straightened out the schedule I had unconsciously crumpled in my hand. "Miss Kruger." "Oh, she's easy." "Fourth period?" "Yes, actually." "Oh, me too. Get ready to do some aerobics. They'll be great for cheerleading, actually." "I'm not going to do that, Eileen." I just couldn't believe her. There I was, a boy in a bobby socks, and a bullet brought in the middle of a New York City high school, and she was acting like it was the most normal thing in the world. Unflapped, she replied, "Oh, well you should. You're certainly fetching enough. Keep in mind, high school is much easier when you're a pretty cheerleader, I assure you. If you change your mind, tryouts are in the gym after school." First, second, and third periods were repeats of the same humiliation. Roll was called, and again, I'd have to identify myself as the Marion Ryan he or she was looking for. I mean really, what difference were another 30 kids with first-hand knowledge going to make? I'd dug my own grave already by that point. After a dejected trudge down to the girls' locker room, I stood frozen outside the doorway staring at the A-frame silhouette on the placard. "Hurry up, Marion," Eileen said, while pushing me gently from behind. I was so startled, I didn't offer much of a fight, and the next thing I knew, I was being helped to a place where no man has ever gone before, at least without getting into a heap of trouble. Mrs. Kruger lets us get away with a lot, but tardiness isn't on that list. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't 15 girls not looking at or talking to each other, while dressing and leaving as quickly as possible. I guess I wasn't the only one who was fearful of my body being scrutinized by everyone else. I quickly found a locker towards the back by Eileen, and stripped down to my undergarments. I fetched the pastel pink playsuit that I was given that morning, and squirmed myself into it, buttoning the front up to the soft white lapels. The short sleeves and legs were wide enough to allow for unrestricted motion at least, unlike pretty much everything else I'd worn since this misadventure had started. The crotch, however, was so tight that if not for my panty girdle it would have left little to the imagination, and my secret would have surely been discovered. Once class started, Mrs. Kruger had us pair off, so of course Eileen insisted that we be partners. We started our warm-ups by stretching each other out. I was pretty sure that I was about to embarrass myself, but all of the physical therapy had kept me limber, despite being trapped in bed all that time. The whole routine seemed pretty light to me, but when I looked around the gym, many of the girls seemed to be struggling. This one girl, Constance, couldn't even bend down to touch her toes. Meanwhile, Eileen and I were pulling each other into splits with barely a few inches between our nethers. Some girls were already out of breath before we even began the actual exercises. The routine started with us on our backs on the floor, lifting our legs, holding them upright in various positions, while counting along to the beat of some classical record playing in the background. When we found ourselves on our feet, the exercises became more of a dance. It was fun. Don't get me wrong, it was hard, and definitely the most I'd exerted myself since the previous year, but it was a far cry from trying to lift a dumbbell I was never going to be able to lift while an angry old man screamed and blew his whistle at me. 30 minutes later we were doing our cool-down stretches, and I'd nearly forgotten my predicament for the first time all day. Mrs. Kruger approached Eileen and me, squatting down next to us. "You girls did great today." "As per usual, Eileen. Ms. Ryan, I'm counting on you to be an example for the other girls as well. I assume you're going out of cheerleading, yes?" "I've been trying to get her to, Mrs. Kruger, but she says she can't," Eileen added, piling on the guilt. "Oh, why not?" Mrs. Kruger asked inquisitively. Well, my mother is out of town until the weekend, and I really think I should ask her first. Also, I have to get home today straight away after school, so I won't be able to try out anyway. I'm not sure why your mother would have an issue with a red-blooded American girl such as yourself trying out for the cheerleading squad, but it is admirable to have such reverence for your parents. It's more than I can say for a lot of young ladies today. I'll tell you what, don't worry about the tryouts. I'm the faculty supervisor, so you can consider that a formality. Monday is our first practice. When your mother gets back, talk to her, and if she says it's fine, be here after school, and there will be a spot for you. "Thank you, ma'am," I quietly replied, while Eileen sat across from me beaming. History was next. The only thing I remember about that class to this day is that he was a stodgy old man who lectured verbosely, with little else in the way of instruction. He was so very boring. If not for the textbook, I think I would have failed every exam. Next was home economics. In previous years, I'd written it off as a substanceless class full of girly nonsense, but boy was I about to find out just how wrong I was. Instead of desks, there were several workspaces with 2 seats behind each. Right in the front row, as soon as I entered the room, there sat Ella, who upon seeing me dressed just as prettily as when we'd arrived, shook her head and covered her eyes before taking a deep breath. I took the seat next to her and got out my notebook. "Hi, Marion," she said, dryly. "I see this morning didn't go according to plan." Before I could respond, the teacher, Ms. Kirtley, blew in like a storm and started passing out syllabi while nearly shouting, "Give me your attention, girls, because I'm only going to say this once. The first couple of weeks we're focusing on budgeting for your household and meal planning, but you're going to need your own aprons by the time we start on practical skills. Also, make sure to get your own sewing kit by next month, or you will fail that section. Observation is not participation. Please understand that is not a joke." I've never met another person so aptly named. The rest of the class went by without incident, and when the bell rang, I was finally free to worry about something else. What was going to happen when I got home? I skipped the bus and chose to walk in silence. Ella followed closely behind but didn't say anything other than to shoo off some boys in a convertible who stopped to offer her a ride. When we got back to the apartment, I tried to think of some way to stave off discovery, but decided it was time to rip off the Band-Aid. After ascending the steps, I opened the door and crossed the threshold, where Magda was sitting on the sofa. She stood to greet us. "Kachini, who is your?" She started before looking me in the eyes, and froze momentarily. "Oh my lord. She took a few steps back and fell back onto the couch, then, after getting her bearings, laid into me. "Surdusco," she shouted, standing back up. She'd called me that hundreds of times, but I don't think I'd ever heard it with such ferocity. "Would you care to explain why you're going about town looking like that? I don't care what you do at home, but out there, someone could hurt you," she said through sobs. "It's not his fault, Mom," Ella said, rushing to my defense. She explained how this all started, trying to put the blame on herself, but I wouldn't let her take all the heat. For the first time in a few days, I told an adult the entire truth. My thoughts, my motivations, my actions, all of it. Even the kiss. "So you see, Mom, it's just the circumstances that got us here," Ella said, wrapping up our story. "Circumstances? I don't see any circumstances. Where is the gun to your head? Where is the coercion? Every decision you've made, Marion, has been your own. You thought every option you chose was the best. That's why you chose it. Now you have to live with that. As much as I can feel like it, I'm not your mother. You're going to have to live with those decisions, at least until Nancy gets back. Then, she can decide what's best for you. At least I can take solace that you're pretty. It will definitely make it easier for you. I love you, and I just want you to be happy with who you are, but I can't say I'm not worried. The Nazis rounded up people like you first, and they were never heard from again. People here like to act like that could never happen again, but I've seen it. I know that all it takes is a few evil men, and a city of fearful people." She placed her hand on my cheek and said, "Just be careful, Surdusco. If this is who you are, then I'd suggest that from here on out you conduct yourself as nothing less than a proper young lady. We don't want some little boy discovering anything he shouldn't find. I couldn't imagine losing you." Magda started to tear up again, and then rushed to her bedroom, closing the door behind her. I quickly followed suit, and went to my room crying, slamming the door behind me, leaving Ella standing dumbfounded. For the second night in a row, I went without dinner. At least my waist cincher wasn't as tight. The next morning, guilt-ridden, I was sitting at Ella's vanity, while she performed her magic, covering the under-eye bags that come from a night of weeping. Always the miracle worker, she hid my exhaustion well, and I was back to my pretty, polished self. After getting dressed, I opted to skip breakfast, bogged down by the weight of everything. However, just as we were gathering our purses and school bags, I noticed a small sewing kit set on top of a neatly folded apron, with a note pinned to it. It read, "You'll need this for home, EC," with a little heart at the bottom. The relief I felt was indescribable. I still didn't know how things were going to shake out, but at that point I at least knew that Magda wasn't going to be mad at me forever. Over the next couple of days, school went by without anything of note. One thing I did notice was how much nicer people treated me. It turns out Eileen was right. Being attractive gets you a lot further socially than I'd ever been, and I wasn't even trying. The attention was actually pretty nice. One problem, though, was that I didn't know how to dissuade any unwanted male attention, but fortunately for me, I had Ella. She was downright ferocious when it came to protecting my virtue, which seemed to be her euphemism of choice. Each night that week dinner was a little closer to something resembling normal. That second night back from school, I was about to change back into my boy clothes, when Magda insisted I wear what I was wearing until after we finished eating, as there was no point in creating more laundry. From then on, my skirts became just another standard part of the scenery. Thursday evening, the phone rang during our meal. Tensions might have calmed down, but I still knew better than to get up to answer it while we were eating. Magda left the table to answer the call. I could only hear half of the conversation. "Hello, no, she can't. We're sitting down for dinner right now." "I see, yes, Well, thank you for asking me first. That's very respectful, that's fine with me, as long as you have her back by curfew, and you leave me your parents' telephone number. Okay dear, I'll have her call you after. Goodbye. Does Ella have a date? I asked, smirking across the table. No, you do, if you call him back and accept anyway, Magda said, nonchalantly. I nearly spit my drink out. Wait, was that Andy? Yes, it was. He was very polite. I approve for now, just make sure you're home on time, or I'll make sure your mother grounds you until you're 30. I was floored. A week ago I was living my life as any other American boy, but somehow, in the blink of an eye, I was a sweet young girl being courted by the rich boy from across the tracks. I returned Andy's call after dinner, only agreeing to the date, after making him beg, just a little. I figured, at the very least, I might as well get one more wonderful night on the town before everything came crashing down around me. Saturday night, I was dressed in a simple blue sheath over a white blouse with a jabot collar. I was stepping into my black court shoes when there was a knock at the door. I was about to answer it when Ella stopped me, saying, Mom's gotta give him her spiel, plus it's a chance for you to learn how to make an entrance. While I eavesdropped, she added one final touch to my look, a little blue bow, pinned to the side of my bouffant hairdo. Through the door, I could hear a muffled lecture, with a few key words like gentleman and intentions standing out. It was hard for me to make out everything through Magda's accent though. When there was what I could best approximate as an optimal silence, I seized the opportunity. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and stepped through the door. Andy greeted me warmly. Hey there, Marion. You look lovely this evening. He was quite handsome in his tie and sport coat. I could tell he was definitely wound a little tighter than usual on account of Magda's extreme scrutiny. After gathering my belongings, and suffering through one more long-winded reminder about curfew, we stepped out to the street, where parked on the side of the road was his dad's red Chevy. He opened the door for me, just like a gentleman, and held it until I swung my feet into the vehicle. We wound up spending the entire night in that thing. Our first stop was a drive-in restaurant, where I was far too nervous to really eat much anyway. I really only ate my fries. Kids back then were all motor culture, and this place was particularly noisy, so we didn't really get to talk too much. Andy had to pull out extremely slowly just to avoid hitting one of the dozen car hops zipping around on their roller skates. It was a relief when we finally made it about the parking lot. The rest of the night was to be spent at the drive-in theater down by the water. We arrived about 30 minutes early, so after we found our space and hooked up our speaker box, we had nothing to do but talk until the movie started. Back then, the front seat was just that, one seat. There was nothing between me and him. I think he could tell I was nervous, and he really didn't want to come off as fresh. The tension was palpable, so I took it upon myself to break the silence. Thanks so much for taking me out tonight, Andy. I hope Magda wasn't too much. She means well. No, he replied, waving his hands. She was fine. It must be crazy for you, and Ella though, having two moms in the house and all. It can be a bit much sometimes, but the laundry is always done, and we always eat our vegetables, I joked, taking the opportunity to scoot a little closer to him. What's this flick anyway? It's called Creature with an Atom Brain. I know you like science fiction, so this seemed like the obvious choice. It sounded interesting enough. It had been over a year since I'd been to the pictures, so this was a milestone for me. Now, I'll admit that by today's standards that film would be considered pretty corny, but in the opening scene, when that robot zombie shows up at the mansion and kills that man, I nearly peed my panties. Just as the zombie was about to grab him, I jumped and covered my hands with my eyes. That's when I noticed Andy had wrapped his arm around me and was pulling me closer to the safety of his chest. He was a huge nerd, but he could be pretty smooth when he tried. That's as far as he went, remaining the picture of a gentleman. As I grew more comfortable, my attention was less on the movie and more on the young man to my left. I let my head rest on his shoulder and let my mind wander. How far could this actually go? It had to end eventually, I thought, but I didn't want it to. At 10:15 sharp we were parked on the curb outside my apartment. Andy had already zipped around the car and opened my door. I took his hand, welcoming the help to step up onto the elevated sidewalk. There we locked eyes, and for the two of us, the world stopped turning. He was so nervous a little sweat had collected on his brow. "Marion, I gotta say, I just think you're the keenest. I want you to be my girl. Will you wear my ring?" He fumbled through his pockets and pulled out his class ring, with a thin pretty chain looped through. "You want me to be your steady?" I asked, swept up in the moment. He just nodded his head hopefully. A few days prior, I had thought that I wanted this all to be over, but in that exact moment, none of that mattered anymore. I had made a full 180 and now, I never wanted it to end. This boy made me happy. In a way that had been drilled into my head that he wasn't supposed to, but he did, and I didn't care. I gushed, yes, and took the ring from him, looping the chain around my neck and wrapping my arms around his. I planted a big wet one, half on his lips, and half on his cheek, leaving a big red print. "That's just swell, Marion," he beamed, pulling me in tightly. We kissed full on the mouth one more time before he shooed me off, trying to stay in Magda's good graces. I hurried up the stairs and opened the door to the dark apartment, swooning over the hunky dreamboat who I could now officially call my boyfriend. For a brief moment I didn't have a care in the world. I went to set my purse on the table, but completely missed, dumping it and its contents all over my living room floor because as soon as I turned my head, there was my mother sitting on the couch, quietly waiting for me. "You really do look lovely, honey," she said, as though everything was normal, though I could sense her anxiety in her voice. "Thanks, Mom." I sputtered. "You're back early." "I am. We have a lot to discuss." "I know, Mom." "I'm so sorry about all of this," I cried, as tears welled up in my eyes. "It's okay, baby. You don't have anything to be sorry for," she said, beginning to cry herself. She rushed from her seat and pulled me deep into the kind of comforting hug that only your mother can give. Then she placed her hands on my shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. "Magda told me what you've been up to when I called earlier this week. This is how it's going to be from now on, I take it?" "I don't know, Mom. I don't really see a way out of this without switching schools," I mumbled through deep sobbing breaths. "I see. Is that what you want to do?" she asked, fingering the little trinket now wrapped around my neck. "It looks to me like someone besides the school is expecting to see my daughter again sometime soon. I hope he's a good boy." Then and there I truly hit my breaking point. Bawling, I wailed, "I'm so disgusting. I don't want to be like this, but it's now more apparent than ever that I'll only ever be a fairy. Dad was so repulsed by me that he killed himself, and he tried to take me with him. Seriously, Mom, he crashed the car on purpose." Just then, I collapsed on the floor in front of my mom. I could see she was just as torn up as I was. She kneeled down and pulled me tight into her bosom and stroked my hair while my tears stained the bodice of her dress. "I don't know what you're talking about, Marion. I dropped the furniture we were supposed to be delivering because I'm such a weak sissy. Dad was going to get fired because of me." "Seriously," he said, "fuck it all," and then flipped his truck on purpose. My mother gently placed her hands on my cheeks and forced me to look into her eyes. "Oh, you poor thing. I'm so very sorry I haven't done a great job protecting you from him. Calm down, baby. I need you to take a few deep breaths and listen to me." I rubbed the snot from my nose onto my crisp white blouse sleeve and tried my best to pull myself together. She continued, "You didn't make him do that. Do you understand? I need you to understand. You did not make him do that. Your father killed himself because he was an angry, miserable, little man who couldn't take responsibility for his own failures, and he tried to kill you to punish me. He didn't care about anybody but himself." At this point, I'd managed to stop sobbing. I tried to regain my composure. "I don't understand. Why did he want to punish you?" Mom took a deep breath and pinched the bridge of her nose for a moment, sorting out what she wanted to say. "Honey, look, it's time I was honest with you. I never loved your father. When we met, I was young. There are a lot of expectations on us girls when it comes to our desires. I was supposed to meet a boy and fall in love, then get married and make babies, like any other good Catholic girl. The thing is, I've never really been attracted to a man. I've definitely never loved one. I had been spending a lot of time with one of my schoolmates. They called it a romantic friendship at the time. Nobody really paid us any mind, but once I was grown, there were expectations, so I decided that one man was probably just as good as the next." Okay. I was puzzled. "I still don't understand. I married your father to check a box. A lot of folks from the stage share my proclivities. It's common for people like us to marry for safety and to have our true life on the side. My mistake was deciding Mickey Ryan was the best I could do. It was a mistake, but a mistake I'd make all over again, because it gave me my 2 beautiful children. There's nothing wrong with you, honey. You're beautiful. You're just like me, sort of. Marion, the day before the wreck, your father saw me kissing another woman, Magda. He was irate. We got into a horrible fight. He hit me again. That was enough for me though. I told him I wanted a divorce. He said he'd have me locked up in the asylum, so I told him I'd let every 2-bit thug who he owed anything to just exactly where to find him. He stormed out in a rage, and that was the last time we spoke. I could tell it was almost impossible for her to get those words out, but once she did, there was a peace in her expression that I'm not sure if I'd ever seen before. Wow, I whispered, more to myself than her. I guess that story about her grandpa's hair was true. That's a lot, Mom. I know. If there's anybody left to blame, it's me. I'm so sorry. Now she was crying, and it was my turn to comfort her. It's not your fault, Mom. You were trying to make the best of a bad situation. You're so sweet, dear, but the one person I'm completely sure is innocent in all of this is you. Your father was too stupid of a man to ever really understand just how beautiful and special you are. I'm so happy that you're my child. I'd give up the whole world for you." After all that, we held ourselves in each other's arms for a while. Once the tears stopped, we pulled ourselves together, and I asked, "So, Magda, huh?" I didn't see it coming, but suddenly so many things made sense. We've been secretly together since not too long after they moved here. Girls like us don't really advertise for obvious reasons, but still, we just know somehow. At least sometimes. I love her very much. Does Ella know? She might have already. I'm not sure, to be honest. She and Magda went out for a walk to give us some privacy. They are probably having a very similar talk as we speak, so she'll definitely know before they get back. You are both old enough now, and we didn't want to lie to you anymore, especially given your new circumstances. If you're a girl, then that's fine by me. If not, that's okay too. I just need you to know I'm going to love you no matter what. So, is this who you are? I took a minute to think about my response, and after careful consideration, I said, if you'd have asked me yesterday, I would have denied it until I was blue in the face, but after my date, I can't pretend this isn't me anymore. It's the most comfortable I've ever felt in my own skin. Being a girl comes so naturally to me. On top of all that, Andy is stirring up feelings in me that I didn't know I could have. He makes me feel pretty, and I like that. I understand that. Magda makes me feel pretty. I've known some girls like you in my day. It's not as strange as you'd think. Really? I couldn't believe it. I was positive there was some special circle of hell that was being carved out just for me, but here was my mother, telling me she'd personally known that there were at least a few others like myself out there somewhere. Absolutely. There are places people like us go to meet up all over the city. It's a little dangerous on account of the police raids, but some people think taking the risk is better than being alone. Girls like you would often come. A lot of them could only be themselves on the weekend when the city is dark, but there's a select few who get to be themselves all the time. The pretty ones. It's a privilege I thank God you have. You know, Magda even dated a boy like you back in Poland. He was raised to be a seamstress, and from what I understand, when she last saw him, he was one of the best tailors in Warsaw. You could live like that too, but you have to be very careful. If that's the life you want, I'll support you. There's a lot to discuss. We can talk about it later. Right now, I'm just so happy to see you. You're right. We've so much to catch up on. How was your trip? Tell me everything. Funny you should mention that. I've got great news. Epilogue: that following Monday, I was back at school with a brand new pep in my step. I was one of the new cheerleaders after all. There wasn't really a higher rung on the social ladder in high school, so for a girl my age, I was on top of the world. Still, I was playfully chastised as a traitor for carrying around the class ring of a boy from a rival school. It would have been hard to find a better boyfriend than Andy. He respected me, and never had a cross word to say. On top of all that, he was pure enough to never go pawing around and accidentally discover my little secret. I was fortunate enough to go to Game 7 of the World Series with the Barkleys family in Yankee Stadium. If it were any other game, it wouldn't have been as exciting, but the Dodgers had never beaten the Yankees in a World Series before. Even though no runs were scored after the fourth, the tension in the air was palpable through all 9 innings. Our boys brought it home though. I don't think there was ever a more joyous occasion back in Williamsburg. The streets were flooded with the pious and the profane, hoodlums and lawmen, the wealthy and the poor. It didn't matter. On that day we were all proud to be from Brooklyn. My brother Marvin came home for Thanksgiving. I assume he and Mom had discussed the change because he didn't seem too surprised when I welcomed him at the door. He just smiled, said he liked my dress, and gave me a big bear hug and a peck on the cheek. Later that week, when he met Andy, I thought he was going to break his hand, he shook it so hard. I guess he figured he had to play the dad, since ours was gone. He didn't realize that poor Andy had already been adequately terrified by Magda. My mother's good news turned out to be a job offer from the Walt Disney Company. They wanted her to move to Anaheim and work full-time at the new park. After discussing it with Magda, they decided to take the offer. It was an opportunity for a fresh start. We'd be moving after the school year finished so Mom could wrap up her run with Peter Pan. That Christmas, they flew the 4 of us out for an all-expenses-paid trip to Disneyland, as promised. It was magical from the moment we got to the airport. Ella and I felt so grown up in our suits and smart little hats. For days of fun, then we had to head back for what would sadly be my last 5 months in Brooklyn. The rest of the school year was a lot of fun though. Eileen and I became even closer, spending much of our time together as cheerleaders. We still keep in touch today. She's still a bit crazy. Funny enough, Archie and Ella broke up almost as soon as they got together. He was a sweet guy, but he definitely wasn't quick enough on the draw for her. They remained cordial whenever we'd spend time with his sister. He wasn't a bad guy. Last I'd heard, he's been married a while, and has already started his own litter. Ella, my best friend, my teacher, my sister. Without her, I wouldn't be the woman I am today, and for that alone, I'll love her till the day I die. I'll never be blessed with children like she is, but I'm perfectly content being fun Aunt Marion. After all, I get to spoil them rotten, and I never have to deal with the consequences. I had become very attached to Andy, puppy love as they call it. He was the first person to truly make me feel beautiful, inside and out. I adored his family. His mother was always a fun, mischievous co-conspirator to me. She'd get me to chastise him into cleaning his room, and the like. I know she was fond of me as well. She alone was responsible for at least half the new wardrobe I took with me to California. On that last day in the city, with my belongings strapped into the back of a moving truck, I stood on the sidewalk, looking deep into Andy's big brown eyes, tears pooling in mine. I'd never had to say goodbye like that before. I tried to give back his ring, but he told me to keep it. He said, "You're always going to be my high school sweetheart. That will never change." We wrote to each other for a few months after, but when he left for college, that was that. We lost touch. In my many years since then, I've learned that kind of thing happens a lot. In LA, I could begin again. For the first time, in the borough, I couldn't walk around without the lingering fear in the back of my mind that someone was going to recognize me as the lithe effeminate boy who had lived there years before. That wasn't a problem anymore. Mom and Magda had a fresh start as well. I know they were excited to finally get rid of those twin beds. LA wasn't perfect, but it was definitely ahead of the curve for the time when it came to people like us. Most folks were content to just not ask questions. Plus, there was a community to be found, and find them, we did. The sheer volume of queer folk in California was mind-boggling to me, but I quickly acclimated, and then one day, it wasn't that strange at all anymore. It was just life. Through the community, I learned how to find men who appreciated girls like me. As I got older, it was harder and harder to date without my suitor expecting it to go further than I could allow. As gorgeous as I was, people found it strange that I never settled down. Mom, in her infinite support, spent a lot of money on me. Pills and surgeries kept me from never tipping over into the overtly masculine, but there was little to be done about my privates. It'd be a few decades before that was a realistic option for me. Fortunately, that was never something I had to worry about. I met Roger in 1966, 10 years, almost to the day since I left Brooklyn. I'd seen him around the club many an evening, never overtly leering, but his attention was definitely mine and mine alone. One night, he finally got up the courage to buy me a drink, and we've pretty much been together since. I just had to learn to live with the fact that he's a California Angels fan. Fortunately, my Dodgers had followed me out west in '58, so I had backup. In my recent years, I've learned to forgive my father, more for me than for him. It's not an excuse, but I know the man was in a lot of pain. I was too. Those days are long gone though. I've been blessed with about as good of a life as a girl like me could expect in those days. Through my journey, I've connected with so many wonderful people, and they've each helped me find a little piece of myself, but it all started with the love of sweet Andy Barkley. Don't get me wrong. I'm lucky to have Roger, but I'll always be grateful to my high school sweetheart.